Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, and this week I'm joined by CompTIA's own Seth Robinson and Carolyn April of our research team. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hello. Thanks for having us as well.
So last week, or I'm going to say it was recently, because it may not have been exactly last week when this goes live, we had the privilege of the two of you presenting from the main stage at CCF the 2022 outlook on 2023 trends and the four sort of pillars, components, things, policy, process, procedure, and product. And of course, some of you might go, well, I would like to swap product out with technology. Good for you. I still like the 4 Ps, and I think Seth and April do as well. Seth, if you could kick this off. It's not very often that on MSP 1337, we go into the research side of things when it comes to cybersecurity. So would love to kind of see how you guys came up with this from a theme standpoint, and then just kind of talk us through some of the highlights, because I think, we were drinking from the fire hose for those of for those of us that were there at CCF. It was a lot of drink from the fire hose. There was so much good information, but so little time to absorb it. I mean, I have access to the reports and I'm taking pictures of slides. So I always think that if someone is taking pictures of the slides that you put up on the screen, that there's definitely more to this than the conversation that's happening in the room at that moment, because we don't have time to digest what we just saw. So Seth, kind of tee us off a little bit and give us the background.
Yeah. So when Carolyn and I were figuring out what we wanted to present at CCF and kind of launch the discussion for the rest of the committees and hopefully a lot of the committee agenda for the year, we were looking at our research schedule and recognizing that there are 4 big areas that we address with our research schedule, and that's stuff within the channel, cybersecurity, digital transformation, and workforce.
Sure.
And then within cybersecurity, we've got those 4 areas that you mentioned, policy, process, people, and product. And that's a structure that we've used for a few different years now to try to address the gap that we see in cybersecurity a lot for end users, where they know that cybersecurity is important. They know that something has probably changed from the days of being primarily defensive and secure perimeter, but they don't know exactly what to do with it. And I think this structure that we chose kind of comes from everyone trying to increase their technology footprint, right? And 20 years ago, cybersecurity was kind of just an offshoot of IT, which was primarily infrastructure. Technology has become much more than that now. Companies are doing a lot more, and they have to think about cybersecurity proactively. And we think that this is a structure to do it. Carolyn, I know that you have seen similar stuff in your channel surveys of how MSPs and even vendors and distributors are kind of reacting to cybersecurity. So I'll let you kind of add in what you're seeing from a channel perspective.
Sure. Great to be here. It's funny, the whole topic of cybersecurity as it pertains to channel, and Chris, you can maybe weigh in and validate for me or not, seems to be greeted with both a lot of excitement about the opportunity. It can be a lucrative area for channel companies, MSPs, vendors, but also with a lot of trepidation. It's kind of overwhelming. And the cybersecurity bucket itself has just become massively complicated. It is something that is relentless and is never going away. And so you've got providers out there that are constantly trying to keep up or keep as far ahead as they can with the cybersecurity threats that are out there, continue to upskill their people so they know what they're doing, and be able to talk to the customer in a way that is convincing and makes them sound like they know what they're doing yet again. So I think it's kind of this double-edged sword where it's a great opportunity for the channel and they get excited about it. And they're also, some of them, overwhelmed, especially some of the smaller companies out there in the channel space, that for them to put together a full cybersecurity practice that kind of ranges across all of the various sub-disciplines within cybersecurity would be pretty daunting for them to do. So it's nice to have this kind of structure that Seth was just talking about. So if you're just starting out, or even if you're somewhere in the middle where you've already offered cybersecurity, but you want to take it to the next level, it's good to have this kind of it is linear, but also just this sort of roadmap for you to follow to make sure that you've got the pieces in place. It's no different than having any sort of roadmap or anything else that you might do if you decide to get into managed services forever. It's really good to kind of settle on what your processes are going to be before you decide to go out and say, I'm an MSP, similar to getting into a discipline like this.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think if I go back in time, it was largely underwhelming being an MSP from a how we started. So like, pick a PSA, do an RMM, do these things, and suddenly you're now in the category of MSP. And we forgot several things in that sort of sequence, and that was, why did we pick the one we did? In fact, why did we pick one at all? Today, those are all sort of predefined, almost fill in the product into that component. If you're going to stand up an MSP, it's almost, you can get the IKEA manual for standing it up. What you're going to do with that, that's where it gets interesting. And I think, I was looking through the trends that were, or the issues that you had in there driving cybersecurity, and there's a common theme, or maybe even two. One is like, this is all about data. So thinking about the overwhelming piece is like, at the end of the day, it's about data and protecting data. So whether you're needing more skills for staff to do a better job, or any number of things, it still comes down to how well can we protect data from falling into the wrong hands, or being put in places that it shouldn't live. And along with that is the whole I just totally drew a blank on it. The privacy component. And if you guys, I'm sure you've seen, but like ISO's got 11 new controls that they've added to their framework. NIST is releasing 2.0, which is going to have additional prescriptive and more on privacy. So there's this trend happening with frameworks that are both regulated frameworks and unregulated, where privacy is suddenly like, hey, we've got to get more prescriptive with this. And so I think, just kind of thinking back to the 4 pillars, the 4 Ps that you guys started with, I mean, you're setting a structure that does exactly that, right? If I have the methodology to go with this, then I have the means to be successful, and at least know where I need third-party help or resources outside of my organization, regardless what the category they fall into. Maybe if it's the industry trade organization like CompTIA, to help fill in those areas that I just, as a small MSP, may not be able to pull off. I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you point out that there are these different drivers or different threads within cybersecurity that are causing change. And you've got data. Everyone's becoming a lot more reliant on data. You have privacy, which isn't as much of a technology issue as it is just a regulatory issue or a process issue, or how you're handling things, or even how you're describing how you're handling things, being transparent about it. And I think that that's what has made cybersecurity a standalone discipline now, rather than just being a piece of IT. If you look at an end user, especially an enterprise end user, they have a CISO. They've got a chief information security officer who is 100% dedicated to cybersecurity. That person has a team of people who are dedicated to cybersecurity. They're not like network admins that are doing cybersecurity on Fridays. So
that's the best time to do it, especially after lunch.
I think that for us, these 4 steps are a little bit of a top-down approach to start changing the mindset around cybersecurity, and then start driving some of those downstream decisions. And so for us, it starts with policy, which we don't necessarily mean the policies that you might write for your organization. We mean the mindset. We mean, what is your organization's overall policy around cybersecurity? what level of cybersecurity do you want to have? Because we all know that you can't get perfect cybersecurity. You can keep throwing money at it, and there's always going to be something to do. So you have to start making some of these decisions.
So would you say that's like you're defining the scope within your organization? Like this is who we are, this is our vision casting and who we want to, even our culture. If I understand the way you're approaching this, we're saying top down, the premise of what we exist to do as a company should get defined at that level.
Yeah, it's like, here is how cybersecurity fits into our DNA, right?
That's
Here's
a
how
good
we
choice
are
of
going to,
words.
here's how we're going to behave around cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And so like for this year, what we pointed out is that there needs to be a lot more intersection between cybersecurity and business activities. You know, again, you can't just be thinking about business activities. And I think that this is true of general IT, that there's been this integration now. And if you're thinking about a business activity, if you're thinking, you know, we want to grow into this market, you're going to be asking the question, well, what technology are we going to use to grow into that market? You also have to be asking the question, how is cybersecurity going to play into that? You know, all of the cybersecurity questions that we should be asking. So I think interweaving and integrating cybersecurity into business objectives is something that we don't see a lot of companies doing. And I think that what we're going to explore this year is the way to do that is through like a risk analysis approach. So like every one of these business activities would have some risk associated with it, and that drives the cybersecurity conversation.
I was going to say the risk word, but like I think I didn't want to say it either because it's like one of those 4-letter words that we're not allowed to say, you know, on air because we might get, you know, bleeped out. Nobody likes to have the risk conversation, and yet the reality is, as cybersecurity professionals, you know, risk is an inevitable part of the conversation. But prior to talking about cybersecurity, businesses still are taking risks. Risk, can I make payroll? Risk, can I, you know, am I number one or number two in my vertical? That hasn't changed. All we've done is added complexities within those risk variables that go along with that. So I like that. I think the question I have, kind of throwing it back at you, is the solution provider largely maturing fast enough to recognize that they need to have these risk conversations as we look into 2023? Because I think our client base is largely asking these questions, especially if they're, you know, 30 to 50 employees plus, they're having risk conversations. But the smaller companies and solution providers largely fall into this. They don't like having the risk conversation because I want to jump to product, right? I want to jump to, look, if I buy product XYZ and I throw that in there, then I don't have to have the risk conversation because I know it reduced it by at least something.
Well, I think that might be changing. I mean, one of the data points in the upcoming state of the channel study that'll be that we're doing right now was a question that asked the MSP portion of our respondents specifically what the number one thing customers are asking for right now in the product/services department. And far and away, it was cybersecurity, services and cybersecurity services. So clearly, as you know, most MSP's customers are smaller customers.
Sure.
And these smaller customers are the ones they're saying have cybersecurity top of mind. Those customers must be changing. They must be more advanced in their thinking because they're demanding from their providers to talk to me about cybersecurity, provide me with cybersecurity. So we may be at a point here where it's not so scary to have that risk conversation with these customers because they may want to hear it right now.
I guess my question, just to clarify, so like 3 years ago, we were having the same security conversations largely, like put these tools in, follow these processes and procedures. And that's what ideally, that's what we wanted to see. But if you would have had 6 to 10 MSPs in a room and said, hey, how many of you use a GRC platform? You might have had that many people raise their hand and say, what is a GRC platform?
Yeah.
Today, I was just blown away at the number of MSPs that not only are talking about how GRC is important as a platform and a tool, but how to go client facing. That to say, I still think that the vast majority does not like the idea of talking about risk. So I'm not saying that they won't do it. I'm just curious, like, what will it look like when it plays out this year? Like, will they really, you know, sort of do it? or is it going to be we talk about it, but we still sort of steer away from it? The
Are you
risk
saying
part of
that-
the
Are you saying that the solution provider or MSP is afraid to have a risk conversation?
yes,
Because they think that's a third rail with customers,
yeah.
or that the customer doesn't want to talk about it, or both?
I couldn't definitively say the latter part, but I think that the conversations around security often trump the conversation about risk. So they know they have a challenge or a problem, but we're not scoring it. We're not really digging into like, well, what is the real business impact if we analyze from a risk standpoint? We literally look at it through the security standpoint and go, look, if we put these products and services in place, we can minimize risk, but we didn't actually talk about, do we need to put this product or service everywhere? Do we need to just put it like in one place? Because it is easier to say, let's secure it all, than it is to identify what really needs to be protected, what really is at risk. That's, and I could be totally wrong here. I'm sort of just based on observation of what I've seen to this point, and just curious more than anything, like as we go through this year, how do the solution providers behave in the context of risk conversations versus their clients bringing them a need and they're selling them a product or service?
Well, if they understand that it's an opportunity for an upsell there, I mean, you can charge a lot more for a risk analysis as a
Sure.
service, over and above the products that you end up selling and the tools you end up selling to them. If you think of it with that mindset, a
Yeah.
business mindset on your end, I'm going to make more money if I introduce this risk analysis, then it obviously becomes more attractive for you to
Yes,
do.
absolutely.
Get over whatever your fear is of discussing
Yeah.
it with the customer, because it means A, it's a win for the customer, they're safer, and B, it's a win for you, you make more money.
I love it.
Yeah, I think I'd add, like, for a lot of solution providers out there, I think this is the transition to beginning to think like an IT department, right?
Ooh.
Up to this point, so many of them have been product centric.
Yeah.
And an IT department is not just a procurer of product and installer of product, right?
Right.
They've been running that product for a long time. And so many solution providers have taken a step towards becoming an IT department when they add managed services. But this is a step beyond that to begin thinking strategically, right? And begin having a business conversation. And again, that's a mindset shift. It's a mindset shift for the end customer to not be thinking about cybersecurity as only product, only firewall and antivirus. And it's a mindset shift for the people that are providing technology services, right? And I think you have to at least recognize that that's where the discussion is starting. And maybe pick any individual solution provider out there. Maybe they don't want to become that like virtual CIO. Maybe they're like, no, I'm just going to resell product, and that's fine. And that's great. But recognize the context that you're selling that product in, that there has to be, kind of see if your client is having those conversations and understand who they're having them with. And if it's not you, that's okay. There can be lots of people playing in the pool here, but the people are going to, and customers are moving towards building that culture, and then the second step would be setting up the processes, right? And I think that's where, if you're a solution provider that's only dealing with the product, that's where you really have to start understanding what's happening, is like, which processes are you setting up that could use some of my products? And those processes, there's tons and tons of them, right? There's all the standard defensive ones of doing like incident management,
right?
And then there's new proactive ones like doing penetration testing and doing audits. So there's a wide range out there. Ultimately, almost all of them need some kind of a product. But if you don't know what kind of processes your customer is trying to implement, it's hard to know which products they're going to be interested in buying.
Well, it's funny. I was gonna say, we got to get through 4 of these, and we're running out of time. But you kind of segued into the process so very naturally, and since we're in process, it made me think about the one that did not have a very high number on it, which is tabletop exercises, and I find that interesting today because since CCF, I've had 3 conversations with MSPs about how to approach and strategize around doing tabletop exercises with their clients. And one of them was like, we're thinking about doing it like once a year, and we'll do or once a quarter, and we'll do one tabletop exercise. And I'm like, why would you do one? Like if you have the audience, like do like 4, do like 6, like just swap out the characters and do it again. And they're like, huh. Because I feel like this goes back to like, well, we had had a conversation the other day. Business owner suddenly died, and they held the keys to the castle, right? Like, and how to get the keys to the castle when the key person is gone. And you can take cybersecurity or any business objectives that you might have. It doesn't necessarily have to be cybersecurity. And it's like, if you have good processes in place, you should have at least at some point in time put something in motion that would say, while that's an inconvenience, it's not we are out of business until we get those credentials back in 3 or 5 or 10 days or however long it might take. It's interesting because I feel like the GRC, the tabletop exercises, some of the stuff that largely MSPs haven't talked a lot about in recent years, you guys have in here as like, this is the outlook for 2023, which is an awesome shift. Like, it goes back to what you said earlier. We are shifting suddenly at a very rapid rate. So even some of the stuff I know I've said that you guys have corrected me on is a reminder that, Chris, you sold your MSP like 7 years ago, and the world has changed since I sold my MSP. The world is definitely a different place.
That it is.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to touch that one. It's so different from 6 years ago on so many levels, right?
Right. Absolutely. I didn't completely leave the MSP space, but I mean, like, just looking back at then, and just even going back to like, say, the last 3 years, I mean, 2 years, we're it's almost like the days when we get excited about the next Pentium chip that would come out, and it was gonna be that much faster, and everybody's like waiting for the PC to release so that we could go buy it. And today we're kind of like, new chipset, but in this space, I think it's evolving almost like that because of the urgency that we have around protecting data, staying in business, and not just staying in business, but thriving and growing our businesses, largely tied to, if I follow the 4 Ps, I'm setting myself up to be successful with that model.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's why, I mean, Seth, you can weigh in obviously, because this is your little roadmap here, but yeah, I think that's why product sort of comes at the end on our list here, is that so much today is about expertise. When you go and see a customer, so much is about your reputation, your skill set. So that gets to the people part of this,
right?
Ability to translate that skill set to the customer's people. So educating them as well, so that they understand the tools they're using and some of the risks that they're taking and how to avoid them. And it really becomes more of an expertise and skills and services type of sale.
Sure.
And the products kind of just fill the gap. You are
Right.
the expert on the products as well, and you want to make sure that you are aligning the best tools with whatever that particular company needs. And every company's different. If you're in, working in a vertical industry, there may be a type of security tool that's much more applicable to that company than you would use in a different company. But again, that all comes at the end. And I think we really sort of want to front load the fact that this is really about rigor and expertise as you go into customers.
Yeah, I think that's right, Carolyn. And I think that the other part of that, of what you're saying there, and kind of, Chris, you're mentioning this too, there's just so much complexity in the space now. And I think that as an industry, we've maybe missed the mark a little bit in the past by trying to tell everyone that they have to become this new thing. Like everyone is moving towards this new nirvana. And I think the reality is that the pie is just growing, right? And so like we keep making this point about like a solution provider needs to decide who they are and where they want to sit in the value chain. And I think that getting through the first 2 steps and moving to these second 2 pieces of our cybersecurity roadmap is where the turn begins to happen into tactics, right? And, Chris, you were mentioning before we started recording here that you had a member walk up to you and kind of talk about the people part of this and maybe feel a little bit of tension there, that people are a little farther down the list. And I think it is important to remember that this order is really from an end user perspective. This isn't necessarily how a solution provider might decide what kind of business model they want. But this is the part where they need to decide, am I investing in new skills or not? Am I investing in new skills, or am I working with the people I have? Because if I'm working with the people I have, that's great. I'm just going to fit in at this part of the value chain, because
Sure.
you might have a lot of clients and users that would hire a cybersecurity consultant to come in for a one-time engagement, really help them work through those first two stages, and then they need to get into the day-to-day. You know, now that
Yeah.
cybersecurity consultant's going to walk away and not be there, and they need that day-to-day MSP or solution provider, and that would start with the people, you know, the skills, and then eventually the product. And so I think it's perfectly okay for any MSP or solution provider, or MSSP, if we want to throw that one out there, to kind of say, how much of this stack do I want to take on? And then once I've decided that, you know, based on my clients, now I'm making decisions on skills or hiring or not to do that. I'm going to work with what I've got, and I'm going to meet my clients' needs that way.
I feel like as we transition, because we got one more to cover still, I mean, we're in that people. I think that the misalignment isn't whether or not people process product or people process technology is relevant even in the context. Because I think when I hear how you guys have described this to me, this is a methodology for an alignment with what I am doing today. So like, how did I start my company 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago, however long ago it was? If I follow this methodology today and I look at my business, how am I existing today, and who I am and who I want to be, to your point, like where do I want to sit in this ecosystem as an MSP or fill in the blank identity, and then go, okay, so now I'm looking at this through the lens of what do I have? Well, I got people. I currently have some resemblance of process and procedures, I hope. And then I have, what are the products that I currently have today? And how far out of alignment are those things when I walk through the methodology you just presented me with? Because I obviously need to do probably quite a few correct course to see that larger, grander opportunity materialize in front of me. That's my take on it.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that every company is no one's gonna have this complete palette
Right.
of all of these items here. And I think to Seth's point, the reality that though we talk about, you know, the business is changing so much and everybody's got to move to the next thing and whatever it
Yeah.
is, you know, what we find in our research, I just found in State of the Channel, is, yeah, there's a lot of shuffling and a lot of change going on. And there are plenty of companies that are moving their business model or moving up the
Sure.
stack, cybersecurity, getting beyond the basics and wanting to be a higher end cybersecurity company. But the reality is, and this speaks to what you said, Seth, is that the ecosystem itself is getting broader, like more players,
Sure.
but people can stay in their roles. And there's plenty of companies who are, and they're perfectly happy to stay in their roles. So I think when you go down this policy, process, people, product checklist, if you're not able to say, I'm comprehensive on all four of these things, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing a bad job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally
And
understood.
I think that's something to recognize.
Yeah, and to just kind of follow, like, it's all about this constant improvement. And I think following this methodology gives me the ability to just like, hey, whether it's quarterly or whatever, and like, hey, let's just walk through it. You know, what's changed? What do we need to improve or realign with? Which kind of goes back to something you said earlier. I remember, you know, many years ago when I started an MSP, we always would say, you know, we are the IT department for client X, but I don't know that we ever saw ourselves actually as an IT department. We just saw ourselves as the replacement to needing an IT department. And to kind of what you said, it made me really rethink about it right now. What is an IT department? Did we ever, as an MSP, sit down and go, what is an IT department? If we had a company of, say, 500 plus employees, what would an IT department look like? And if we wrap our heads around that, are we in fact operating as an MSP for our clients as an actual IT department for them? And if it's not in its whole, it kind of goes back to, we don't necessarily have to do all the things in here super well. It doesn't mean we're not doing a good job. It's what are the things that we are taking on that replace the IT department, or remove the need for maybe as many layers in the IT department that a client might have. I mean, we've seen co-managed IT, you know, client has help desk, client has NOC services, and then as an MSP or MSSP, we're providing that SOC service or some level of specific niche fill for that organization. So is that sound about right? Like, I feel like we maybe as MSPs sometimes lose sight of the fact that we're not just this third party that sits outside, that looks through the window and calls the shots and tells them what they need to do from a technology standpoint. We are their IT department. If they don't actually have one, we have to remember we need to go inside and be that.
Yeah, I think that thinking about it differently, we've talked about that a few times now. And another thing that I've mentioned a few times is like this methodology and most of this report is from an end user perspective.
Sure.
MSPs should think about themselves as an end user, right? Like, I think a lot of MSPs, if they see this presentation or hear this discussion, they're going to be thinking about, how do I apply this to my portfolio? Like, how do I apply these 4 steps to my portfolio of services and products that I'm trying to put out there? The best way to actually work through that, I think, is to apply it to your own business and to say,
Sure.
okay, within my business, what is our policy? What is all of these things? And then you get to the point of like, well, what products do I need? And you might realize that like, oh, we've moved to the cloud, but we never really put in a lot of DLP. We haven't
Sure.
put in any kind of like identity and access management. Maybe we should look into some of that stuff, and then we'll know what it is, and then we'll know how to sell it. I mean, I think to just tie off the 4th one here, like, product is just kind of fall out naturally. Like, once you've done the other 3 steps, it's going to be abundantly clear, I think, what products you need to come in, right? And I think the best way for an MSP to figure out, well, which ones are those, which ones are the ones that are going to generate the most interest, is to go through it themselves. And the phrase that we love to use, eat their own dog food, and just kind of figure out, okay, this is what my clients are going through, so these are the things that are going to resonate the most with them.
Yeah, I
So
would piggyback on that just briefly, is that, one of the things that we've found and all of us have seen is, MSPs can be their own worst enemy in with regard to cybersecurity, and that they're out there preaching the gospel to their clients, but not taking stock in-house and having this same level of security going on internally. And they've become obviously a conduit for risk for some of their clients who are on their network. And I don't need to go through the litany of news headlines we've seen to
sure.
that effect. So, when it comes to something like product and tools and all of the things that are on this list, do a little bit of internal assessment first to make sure that you actually know what you're doing internally, and then kind of spiral that out to your customers.
So with that, and wrapping this up in a nice little bow, I think it's a good segue to talk specifically about, doing this first for my MSP versus doing this for my clients. One of the things that I think is really interesting, and it comes up quite a bit, and that is, well, let's just say it's a firewall. Client goes, hey, you want to sell me this firewall, this blinky light box, and it's going to cost $10,000. And it's like, so is this the same box that you use? And MSPs often find themselves in well, we don't, because we're different and we all work from home. And I don't know. I think that this is also an opportunity, to your point of like the drinking my own champagne. That probably tastes better than dog food. Although I've had some champagne that wasn't so great. So, but the analogy isn't necessarily saying that you have to eat the same brand of dog food or the same specific portion of food for what your clients are doing. And I think as you went through this whole process, as we went through all 4 of these things, when we get to product, it should be what's right sized for me, because we're being asked to do this for our clients. Are you seeing that trending where, there's an opportunity to stop getting hung up on what product is solving for in my environment versus what I'm in the opportunity positioning to you, the client, to put into your environment?
I honestly can't say that I see a lot of one-to-one comparison where the MSP is truly saying, well, what do we use? And we'll use that with our customers.
Sure.
But I'll go back to what I said before, in that I think smart MSPs and solution providers are customizing for the customer themselves. So they're realizing what sort of business that customer is. Is it an SMB?
Sure.
Do they, are they a generalist type of company, like in professional services, or are
Right.
they in a vertical industry? Are they in finance, where they have a much higher kind of risk that they have? Do they have a lot of compliance issues that they have to,
Yeah.
deal with? So, to your question, I don't see a lot of MSPs mapping what they use internally necessarily to customers. But if you're wise, you're going to be really taking a good look at what your customer's environment looks like and what their business looks like, and making sure those tools match up with what
Yeah. I like
customer's
that.
company looks like.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I would say on it is, like, it's making me think of another big topic that we could spend, another half hour or more on, which is digital transformation. And we're going to be looking at that more this year, but I think that means so many different things to different people. And, kind of like Carolyn's saying, like, an MSP needs to be able to talk to their clients about these things. And to the extent that they're going to talk to people, they should be going through some version of it themselves, right? And it might not be one-to-one, it might not be perfect, but at least you've been there. At least you tried to do a little bit of it. At least you've kind of fought some of your own battles and realized, like, what needs to change. And then you can figure out if what you're going through is maybe different than what your clients would have to go through.
Sure.
So I think that really just tackling those things yourself, whether it's digital transformation or cybersecurity or whatever it might be, I think helps you understand things through the client's eyes a lot better.
The rules are kind of the same, right? Like, we're not saying that I have the same regulatory requirements being held on me that my client might, but at least I should be able to say, what does this look like if I walk in their shoes? Or for that matter, if it's not their shoes, it's mine. Am I at least putting the security components in place, addressing the risk that might be impacting my business when I look to help them make their decision? Like, hey, we're not so different at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you said what I was going to ask next, which is what's next coming from research, which would be you've talked about digital transformation, and that got into, you had I want to say it was the 4, like, the categories of what's coming from research. What can we expect from CompTIA research in 2023?
Well, next up is Carolyn's State of the Channel. That'll be coming out soon, or will already be out depending on when this goes live. But that's next one up. We always have workforce stuff coming.
Okay.
And then there'll be, smaller pieces of content until the big State of Cybersecurity, which will probably come in like Q3.
Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate your time today. For those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks, and have a great week.